Hey there, it's Michael. Welcome to Whole Again, a show about helping us embrace life with mindfulness and resilience through the wisdom of Kintsugi. Today, we're going to talk about feet, baby. Now, if just the mention of feet makes you feel all gross inside, I feel you. I have a family member who is totally disgusted by feet. In fact, I'm not even sure she wants to acknowledge her feet. She doesn't want to look at anyone else's feet. So if you're in that camp, stay with me. Now, some of you might have thought, we're talking about feet, Michael? Like, where's this going? And we're not going to go there either. We're not going to go on either ends of the spectrum. We're going to talk about feet today because they're so essential to our overall health, whether or not you're recovering from something. That's why I'm bringing you one of our very special interviews with a very special human, Dr. Jen Perez from Gait Happens. And I just love the name of their company. It's so awesome. Now, admittedly, as a young athlete, really leading up to my very first big accident that I call my last bad day, I spent zero time thinking about my feet, except for what kind of really cool footwear I could put on my feet to look, cool. Yes, when it comes to athletics, I did think about function, but let's be honest, I was looking for the hottest kicks on the team. That was my jam. But then I had my accident. And through that, I developed nerve issues through my left leg, but more specifically in my left foot. My left big toe doesn't really want to listen to me. And for several years after my accident, it felt like fireworks were going off several times a day on the bottom of my left foot. It was so painful. So I started to pay more attention to my foot health. And I didn't do a 180. This was a slow step, if you will. Tiny little steps over time. That's our motto here. That's how we recover. That's how we begin to feel whole again. So over the course of several years, I started to pay more attention to the health of my feet, realizing how important they were, not only to my overall health, but my mental health and all my recoveries. And today, I may not be perfect at all this. I might not be giving my feet all the attention they deserve because I got a lot of things going on. I got issues in my tissues. But I will say this, I am so much better with my foot health today than I was, say, back in 2001. So we start somewhere. And this interview with Jen may be the place where you start. She's going to share a lot of great wisdom on how we can get better with our feet so we can feel grounded, more stable, which then leads to better overall health. So if you're ready, slide off your shoes and put your feet up and take a nice healthy breath in and a slow releasing breath out. And get to know Dr. Jen Perez and a little bit more about your feet. I'd love to get started here. How the heck did you land on feet as a profession? You're thinking about going into medicine, most likely, and there's so many different specialties. What compels someone to go
Into
right
feet?
down at the ground and think about feet?
I mean, besides being weird.
Yeah, well, because a lot of people, the foot, people, you have a little foot fetish, and then some people are just like
gross.
skeeved out by
Yeah,
the feet.
totally.
Like, I have an older daughter who's like, don't mention feet, Dad, to me. I'm just gonna,
Yeah.
she gets all squeamish.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So my background is I'm a chiropractor, and I always knew I wanted to get into more of a sports chiropractic realm where it was really looking at movement and how we improve movement and impact life that way. But honestly, I wanted to specialize in shoulders. And so my kind of story was that I have multiple parents. I have three different parents who all have foot things. So I knew the impact that it can have on your life. But I wanted to specialize in shoulders. I went to this course to learn how to use kinesiology tape, really hoping to learn how to use it with overhead athletes like throwers, like baseball players, for example. But the teacher, the instructor, kept using feet as the example for everything. And at first, I was just like your daughter. I was like, no one cares about feet. No one wants to talk about feet. Just stop, right? But the more the weekend went on and the more examples that she gave of the impact that the foot has from a biomechanical perspective on the entire body and how we move and how it affects literally every step we take, it was like the curtains were drawn back. I was like, why is nobody talking about the feet from this biomechanical perspective? It's made of muscles and joints, just like every other part of our body. And yet, no one is having a conversation around mobility and strength for our feet. And that was kind of the turning point for me where I started to dive deep into learning about it. And eventually, that instructor became my business partner, and that is Dr. Courtney
Ah,
Conley. So that is how we came together to bring this education to the world, because truly our mission is to help people move better from the ground up all over the world.
very cool. I love that. I love that origin story. That is pretty cool. So, speaking of Dr. Connolly, on your Instagram page, there's the pinned post,
Mhm.
right? The one that like that's the one everyone you should look at. And so there's some good clickbait
Oh,
here
totally.
from her interview with Stephen Bartlett on his podcast
Mhm.
around the toes and how the toes can predict whether or not you're going to die young or not. I probably don't have that right,
Yeah.
but do explain
Yeah.
because inquiring minds want to know.
Yeah. They got a little creative with the wording. Let's put it that way.
So, well,
So
Steven's good with the clickbait. I will give him props on that. He just it's like it just hooks you right in.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the reality of that conversation is around fall risk, because we know that falls are one of the highest risks of mortality in people over the age of, you could say 65, but honestly over 50, right? Because especially once you get over a certain age, then you have a higher likelihood of fracture and hospitalization. And this is where we start to see that mortality rise, where people aren't actually making it out of the hospital, or they're back in the hospital within 30 days. So that's the reality of that conversation, and where that kind of like, risk of dying conversation comes from. But where it relates to the foot is there's actually some really fascinating research looking at fall risk, because it is something that's highly relevant and highly studied. And there's multiple different research papers looking at it in different ways. And one of my favorites looks at things from history of fall risk, blood pressure, strength of your quadriceps, so your big thigh muscles, and foot strength. And so it's kind of across the board, some of these things that are known to be risk factors for falls, but then foot strength was thrown in there. And of everything else, the only two factors that could be isolated as increasing your risk factor for a fall, as basically an individual risk factor, right? So not just paired with other things, but on its own, was blood pressure and foot strength. And those were the two factors that could be like identifiable on their own. And that was only one of the studies. There's other studies that also look at, okay, well, we talked about this with grip strength, right? So forever, people were saying your grip strength is an indicator of whether you're going to die or not, right? But then they kind of came to the conclusion that that's also just an indicator of your overall fitness level. So is that the same for the foot? Or is it really that your foot strength could prevent a fall? And that's where they then reverse the study to say, if we improve foot strength, does it decrease the fall risk? Like solely focusing on the foot, not just overall fitness level. And the answer was yes. So, really, having strong feet is actually going to bring that risk factor down, which is really incredible when you think about it.
Yeah, that's really wild. And very specifically with my dad, he was in the hospital for a procedure. He got discharged. He went home. I was at home with him. He got up in the middle of the night. His blood pressure fell,
Hmm.
hypotension.
Hmm.
He's a little wobbly to begin with. Sorry, Dad, if you're listening. You are a little wobbly.
No
And
judgment.
so no judgment, like his feet are probably not all that strong and he fell.
Yeah.
And then he spent the next 3 weeks in the hospital and then he
Mhm.
was able to get out. But I've heard that before, like the whole risk factor if you fall above a certain age, you break a hip. That's always the example given. You
Mhm.
break a hip, you're probably going to end up in a rehab facility or slash nursing home. And if you go there, then it's a downward slope that goes pretty quickly.
Mhm.
So, and then Peter Attia, with all his work, he's not the only one, but around longevity and health span, he's talked about grip strength. He's talked about balance.
Yeah.
I know when I first started my rehab journey back in 2001, my physical therapist, I had many,
Mhm.
and you've already alluded to it. They talked about strength, they talked about power, they talked about mobility, and they also talked about balance.
Absolutely.
And I was like, okay, like those four. And after they explained it, I sort of got it. But the common denominators really with that are our feet.
Mhm.
But I would love for you to comment on this. So if we have an injury, let's say we have a meniscus tear in the knee or ACL
Mhm.
or maybe a joint replacement, hip or knee.
Mhm.
So we focus so much on that particular area. I was just talking to someone and their partner had an ACL tear
Mhm.
and it took her about a year to get back. And I know, like recovering as I have and people listening, sometimes the tendon or the muscle or the bone is healed and strong, but we don't necessarily feel like we can trust the repair, if you will.
Yeah.
My theory, and you'll prove me wrong on this, Jen, is that part of the reason we don't really trust the repair, if you will, is that our feet are not strong. Like our feet, we haven't done anything with our feet. And I know even when I'm rehabbing now with my femur fracture, my fracture is solid. There's a rod in there, there's screws, but I'm putting so much emphasis into my feet.
Mhm.
That's when I get a little shaky. So, prove me wrong.
Okay.
I'm open to it, but I'd love for you to just comment on that, the whole trust factor after returning from an injury and the role that feet play in that.
Yeah, it's such a great question because I think it's something that doesn't get addressed in healing an injury very often. So you're absolutely right. So when we do have an acute injury, a very like traumatic injury, if you will, so something like a fracture or where something went wrong. So we're not talking about the like overtime chronic overload kind of injury. We're talking about like one traumatic incident kind of injury. You absolutely have to heal that tissue first. You have to heal the fracture before we can do anything else. But when it comes to the back end of that, we do need to get back into trusting that area in order to move efficiently and move properly, be able to load it properly. But what we often end up doing is because we don't trust it, we offload to somewhere else. So, for example, I have so many patients who come to me with, let's say, left foot pain, and they're like, "Ugh." And most of the people that I see are more of the chronic kind of pain. But I'm going to kind of flip your question to like 10 years down the road because most of them come to me 10 years later with left foot pain when they had a right knee injury. And it's
Oh yeah.
because they've been trying to offload and not trust that right knee. And over time, we're going to end up overloading the structures on the other side, or vice versa, right? It could be the same side, but because, but maybe before, let me answer your scenario with your femur. Okay. So maybe before you didn't have a lot of foot strength or foot stability, but you were able to get away with it because you had a strong thigh. And so you felt strong and stable and you were able to maneuver around it because humans are great compensators. If we can't get it from one place, we're going to get it from somewhere else. But when we take that place away, that place that you used to have power and now you don't trust it, and now you have to utilize something like your calf, your lower leg, your foot, but that's not trained and as stable as it should be, that's when we start to feel those deficits. And then it feels like everything is unstable because your foot can't make up for the femur like the way that your femur did for your foot before, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And through my whole athletic career, often I've had conversations with folks, much like what you just said. It's the left foot that's bothering me, but it's really a right knee issue that started it, or
Mhm.
it could manifest as a left hip issue.
Totally.
We sort of look on the
It's not just the
opposite.
feet. It's absolutely not
It's
just
just
the
either,
feet.
but there's a whole like there's a chain link,
Mhm.
right? It's all connected. And being a meditation teacher, along with everything else I do, I feel like it would be wrong if I didn't ask you that connection between like feet, breath, mind, because
Absolutely.
I, you hear this on the internet a lot, like, the body and mind are connected. And I'm like, Not really. It's like one ecosystem, folks. It's like all together. What's happening in the mind is,
Yeah.
yeah, we're feeling it in the body. What's happening in the body is, percolating up into the mind.
Mhm.
So I would love for you to just talk a little bit further about that whole mind body
Connection and in relevance to the feet.
connection and breath and just with the feet. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let me start with this. So when it comes to the musculoskeletal system, it's really the neuromusculoskeletal system. And the reason that we have to say it that way is because our nervous system rules all. Right? Like, if our nervous system thinks that we're in danger, it's going to do whatever it needs to make us safe. Right? And so when it comes to the feet, there's not an exception. And what I mean by that is something that I actually see a lot is people who have high arches, for example. And let me start by saying flat feet and high arches are not bad things. Let's just get that out of
Okay.
the way. Okay.
All right.
It's like saying that someone who's tall or someone who's short is a bad thing. It's not true unless you're trying to get something off the top shelf, right? But that's my mom, by the way. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Or you're trying to play center in the NBA.
yeah,
Being short, probably not a
probably
good
not
thing,
ideal.
but
Yeah,
but
exactly.
there's exceptions, right?
So, but when it comes to the foot, it's all about function over shape. So it's really about how strong and mobile you are. So that's my kind of like sidetrack there. But going back to those with high arches. So my big concern with those with high arches is, can they move? Because oftentimes they're strong, not always, but oftentimes they're strong, but they're not very good at letting the foot pronate, letting the foot relax, because the foot has to be able to move and change shape in order for us to shock absorb. So every time we take a step, the ground hits back, right? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So when we hit the ground hits us, and we have to absorb that force. In order to do that, the foot has to be able to lower and spread to act as that first shock absorber. Now, sometimes people with higher arches aren't very good at letting go. And this is where I'm going to drive it back to the nervous system, because oftentimes those are the people that are very high stress. They're very type
Yeah.
A. They're always in that sympathetic dominant mode where they're holding on. They're also the same patients that when I get them to stand up to just start our exam, we haven't done anything yet except for talk. There's already sweat underneath their feet, right? So it's just lots of sympathetic tone. So you think about the relationship between the mind and what the nervous system is doing, there's absolutely a physical reaction at the feet, which is then also going to determine how well the foot moves. So it's not just the sweat aspect and the tone aspect. It's also, if I can't let those muscles react or let those muscles relax, then I'm not going to shock absorb very well. And maybe now I end up with a stress fracture because that shock has to go somewhere. So it really is this kind of trickle down effect of how well our nervous system is regulated and the effect that it has on our feet.
Yes, I can so see that. And coming in to see you, if someone has a problem, if they're type A, many of the type A people I've met in my life don't like to be judged, like there's something wrong with me.
Hmm.
And so some of that sweat might be like, oh, she's going to say something's wrong with me. Something's wrong with my feet. And
Yeah.
that's
Or I'm going to
the
say something
story in our
wrong, or
head.
yeah, totally.
Yeah, there's the story in our head gets going, and then, yeah, we feel
Hmm.
all tight, and that just all the shocks from each foot plant just goes through the body. I know, going back to this femur break, I had the femur break up near the hip, but my knee wasn't, I didn't have the right type of flexion in my knee.
Hmm.
And that was all about the whole quadricep being guarded because it went through so much trauma.
Absolutely.
And I knew had to like really lean into my practice of meditation to let, whisper to my quadricep, like, you're safe. It's okay. You can relax
Yeah.
and give it some time to like settle down. And
Mhm. I literally do the same thing with the
yeah,
feet. It's so true. Because I also have certain patients that like I have one, for example, who I can just have him stand and close his eyes and put his hands on his belly, and I like humming for a lot of reasons. So I have him breathe and hum and try to down regulate. But while he's exhaling and humming, I want him to feel his feet sinking into the ground, right? So that's kind of the like, let's descend, let's get that whole nervous system down, but also let the feet physically relax at the same time. Other patients that I have, because again, going back into that personality type, and this is not for everyone, I'm not judging, I'm not making like overarching statements, but it's something I commonly see, is they're also the kind of patient that they came in with a big toe complaint. They better be leaving with a big toe exercise. If I give them breathing, they're going to never come back and they're never going to do it. Right. So I have
yes.
to also tie it in. And one of the ways that it also ties in is in core control, because in order for our feet to have good control, we also need good control from the top down. So the core, the hips, they all affect how our feet hit the ground. And so oftentimes I'm also seeing a correlation at like the core and pelvis. And this is how I tie it in with the breathing, because I say for them, instead of doing a standing one where I'm really obviously working on the feet, I say, I want you to do this core exercise. But in order to give your obliques, and this is all true, by the way, I'm not making it up just to make them do it. But in order to give your obliques time to kick on, because oftentimes their core doesn't kick on very well, I say, I want you to slow down your exhale and hum in a low tone for as long as you can. And that way, when you do that, you go, you can actually start to feel the core kick on. So there's these benefits beyond just the neurological, right? Where we are, by humming in a low tone, we're going to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. From the core perspective, we're going to get the obliques to kick on and get better core control, pelvic control from the top down. And then we also are able to tie that down to the bottom.
And also with that, the breath becomes deeper
Hmm.
and not as shallow as most of us breathe that way. It's all
Absolutely.
up here, right? It
Absolutely.
doesn't really get into our abs, but with that deep belly breath,
Hmm.
like gets down in there, moves things around down there, it
Yeah.
opens some things up, it
Yeah.
allows some things to fire. So
Oh, absolutely. And
the
you think
yeah,
about the diaphragm. So the diaphragm is our muscle that helps us breathe, right? It's the one that actually contracts to breathe, bring our breath. And the diaphragm and the pelvic floor. So, our pelvic floor is, if you imagine a trampoline made of muscles, that trampoline exists between your legs. So, it's really everything underneath you from your urethra to your anus, but it's made of muscles. And those muscles, just like all the other muscles, have to contract and relax. And by the way, this is for all genders. This isn't just
yes.
women, right? So, everybody has a pelvic floor. And the diaphragm and the pelvic floor work together like the top end and bottom end of a Coke can. That's how we actually regulate intra-abdominal pressure of our core. And what's really cool about this is the diaphragm and the pelvic floor are part of a fascial line called the deep front line. This deep front line connects all of these muscles, and guess where else it goes? All the way down from our inner thigh to what's called our tibialis posterior, which is a muscle on the inside of your shin, all the way down to the arch of your foot and your big toe. It's literally
Yep.
all part of the same deep front line. They all work together. So you'll find if you're able to control your big toe, control your arch, control being like, let it relax and let it contract, just like everything else, but all of it works together from the breath to the pelvic floor to the feet.
So cool. Like feet are becoming, as we talk further, Jen, the feet are becoming like the it part of the body as
Right?
people listen. I
Well,
can
I
feel it. I
mean,
can feel
this is you're experiencing what I did 8 years ago when I was in that course, when I went from why am I listening to something about feet to oh my god, this is so absolutely interconnected to everything that we do.
yeah, and like we talked about before we really started the recording, I was in that camp of like, it's the feet. Like, it's just you get a good pair of kicks, get a good pair of shoes. Like, that's what the feet are for, to show off like, your new pair of sneakers. And until I really went through my whole recovery, it didn't connect.
Mhm.
And then I was like, I can see how this is all connected. And even as I've come out of this recovery. I was in the hospital for a bit. All the little muscles in the feet start to atrophy,
Mhm.
weaken a little bit because I'm not really on them, especially my left one. And so now I'm in the process of working on my feet as I'm working on everything else.
Mhm.
And this gets me to the next question that I just mentioned, footwear.
Mhm.
Like we here in at least the States, we love a good shoe. We love it, like sneakers, boots, high heels. We cover our beautiful feet in footwear where we don't necessarily feel the ground.
Mhm.
It puts the foot in these wonky positions that seem to be unnatural. So can you talk about the role of footwear when it comes to our foot health?
Yeah. So, I mean, let me just start by saying footwear absolutely is going to affect the function of our feet. So, whether that's a shoe that actually respects the shape of our foot and allows the foot to function how it was designed, because, like we've talked about, the foot is a very complex structure. So, it needs to be in the shape it was designed in order for all those structures to work properly. Or on the flip side of that, if we have a shoe that interferes with our function, so something like a high heel, for example, where the higher the heel, the more pressure you're putting into your forefoot, the more tapered the toe, the more you're actually taking those toes out of alignment with their metatarsals. So you're cramming them together. The muscles can't fire because they're not actually in the position they need to be in. So all of these things actually affect the function of our foot. And again, like we said, the foot's connected to everything else. So if the foot intrinsic muscles can't fire effectively, that's going to affect our whole posterior chain because they're part of that chain. If our big toe can't fire effectively, that's going to affect our whole deep front line, which is the line that we just talked about that goes up to the pelvic floor. So it's not just the foot. And then there's this other camp where there's footwear that we have been told for generations is healthy footwear that is now being reconsidered. And some of the things that we're reconsidering are how much cushion is needed, right? That's one place to start. And this is it's kind of a hard discussion because cushion is very variable based on your needs. So if you're someone that's in so much pain that you can barely get to the mailbox and you need that cushion to keep moving, by all means wear the cushion, right? But what I would encourage you to do is wear the least amount of cushion necessary to complete the task. So rather than going above and beyond into something that feels like you're walking on a cloud, stay with something that gives you just enough cushion. And here's why. So the more cushion underneath you, the less what's called sensory acuity we have. So we aren't able to feel the ground. It's very obvious, right? If you're walking on a pillow, you can't feel the ground. Well, feeling the ground is how we know where we are in space. So it's kind of like trying to walk with a blindfold on, right? Like if you imagine trying to drive a car and there's fog over the windshield, you're not necessarily going to get where you're going very safely. And that's kind of what we're doing with our feet. We're trying to get them to move and function with this blindfold over them where they don't feel the ground effectively, but we expect them to function anyway. So that's the cushion side of things. So again, cushion is relative based on where you are, where your goals are, but try to stick with as much as needed, but as little as possible. But the big thing is most shoes, even the trainers that you think have been great shoes, have a tapered toe box. And the tapered toe box, if you put your fingers on the sides of the front of your shoe, if your fingers are pointing at each other, it has a tapered toe box. Another way to test this is if you take the insole, the flat, like factory insole that comes inside the shoe, and you take it out and put your foot on there, and then you lift up your toes and you spread them out if they spread, because some of us have lost that ability, right? But if you spread your toes out and put them back down, what you might find is that your toes go over the edge of that insole. And what that's telling us is when your foot is inside that shoe, you're forced to bring your toes together, which again is going to affect the stability of the foot, the engagement of the muscles, and how well that foot is working when we're wearing those shoes. I'll stop there.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, no, that's good. That's good information. So for the longest time, I wore shoes everywhere because I had
Mhm.
some nerve damage in my left foot, and it'd tingle. Sometimes it felt like fireworks. I'd feel it throughout the whole leg. And so, but slowly but surely, like I started, moving towards shoes with
Mhm.
less cushion. I went from sneakers that were really, um, restricting, if you will. I moved to Crocs, which have a lot of cushioning, but my foot
Yeah.
was able to open up more. And then I started playing with walking barefoot a little bit
Mhm.
more around the house, and then barefoot outside on the grass. And then I've moved to a pair of Vivo footwear, which I wear probably more regularly than anything else. It took a while to get used to it, right? Because at first I was like, I'm gonna put these on.
Yep.
I'm gonna go crazy.
That's the
I'm gonna
biggest
wear them a
trap.
lot. And then like 2 days later, I was like, yeah, 2 days later, I was like, oh, mama. Like I was like, my feet were hurting, but I definitely have seen the strength of my foot improve, the spacing of my toes improve. Just overall, my foot health has improved by wearing these shoes. I have another brand, same
Mhm.
concept, but a different brand. So I swap them in and out. But I, like I, I never even considered like how footwear plays a role in our foot health. And can you comment on like
Yeah,
these Vivos that I'm wearing and
absolutely.
just uh, the utility that they might have for someone who is considering doing something to improve their foot health?
Yeah. So the rule of thumb to think about with shoes is the more the shoe does for you, the less your foot has to do. Right? So it's very simple, right? If it
Sure.
has all of
Yeah.
this built-in technology, so it has the support, it has the rigidity, it has the rocker, it has the cushion, the more things that are built into your shoe, the less your foot has to do. But in the long term, and that might feel really good in the beginning, right? Because your foot's on a vacation. But right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's the four
It is,
seasons of
right?
shoes. It's
But,
pretty
like,
cool.
let's
Yeah.
learn from the
Yeah.
movie WALL-E, right? Like, if we don't end up doing anything, like, let's not go
Yes.
on vacation
Yeah,
forever. Yeah.
that's not a good ending. Yeah, you might
Yeah.
meet your Eva, but, like,
Exactly.
it doesn't yeah, it
Yeah.
doesn't it's not a good
So
ending. So,
going
yeah.
into the Vivos, so that's in a category we would call minimalist shoes. So minimalist shoes have very, very little cushion. They're very flexible. There's no support. They have that nice wide toe box. So it's really there to protect your feet from the elements and give you that style that you were looking for that you talked about before. Right? But it's not
Yes.
there to do the work for you. And the result of that is that your foot has to work harder. And the result of that is that it will get stronger. So the research will actually tell you that walking in minimalist shoes over 8 weeks will strengthen your feet. Now, the caveat to that is you have to build up slowly because just like when you're going to the gym, right? If it's your first day back in a year, you're not going to go deadlift 400 pounds on rep one, right? Like, let's not jump in and run that marathon in minimalist shoes on day one. We
Yep.
have to build up the strength of the muscles in our feet in order to build up that tolerance. So that's where I would start with that. But just like you said, even getting into a shoe, like you said, Crocs, right? Another one that I would say would be like Ultra. So shoes that have a nice wide toe
Yeah.
box that have a little bit more cushion can be a great starter step into more functional footwear. And then you can kind of step down in cushion. If instead you're like, I want to just jump in and do the Vivos, right? Or the Biancas or the Splays or the whatever. There's so many brands out there now. And by the way, these are not just athletic shoes. Like I came prepared with a bunch of examples. One of them has leopard print on it, right?
Yeah.
So there's lots of fun shoes out there now. But if you want to jump right into minimalist, you can do that. But what I would say is build up time. So start with 5 minutes, 10 minutes, really let your feet get used to it, and then build up the amount of time slowly and the intensity of the activity. I like to lift in barefoot shoes, but I run in my ultras that have a little bit more cushion to them because there's more force and impact going through the body. And that's okay. And some people like to do both in minimalist shoes, but it's all kind of part of the journey of like self-discovery. And some people won't get to minimalist, and that's okay. That's where that the least amount of shoe possible conversation happens, and that's individual to the each person.
So your guidance is to be patient and
Being patient
experiment.
is the hardest part.
Yes, we're
Yes.
not good at that, John.
No.
We want the quick fix, we want the hack, we want it now,
I
like
know.
Veruca Salt, like, we
I
want it
know.
now, but yeah, I think that's a good guidance. So we'll end here.
Mhm.
So you have so many great resources on your website. As I mentioned earlier, I have your bag of treats, if you will, or foot health treats and
Foot treats.
exercises. And you have other things going on. You got something called Foot Fest that's coming up here in a few
Yeah.
weeks, which is
Y
really sounds really cool. So I'm going to point people to your website and to
Perfect.
Instagram for other resources. But if you had to recommend maybe one or two simple exercises that someone could start doing right after they get done listening to this to help improve their foot health,
Yeah.
what would you recommend?
Okay, so I'm gonna go from most accessible to more requirement, essentially. So, most accessible, walk barefoot. Just like you said, start walking barefoot, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, especially if you're someone who wears shoes in the house even. Try not wearing shoes in the house or try going out in the grass or somewhere that's soft because walking barefoot, your feet have to do the work. So, that's where I would start. If you need assistance with that, or if you have bunions or hammer toes or things where it's painful, even plantar fasciopathies, I love the use of toe spacers. So using toe spacers is going to help restore that space between our toes. It's going to put our foot in that more functional position to engage the muscles and have more stability. So that can be a great addition. And then getting into something that's a little bit more like actual exercise. Number one, I love what's called the lift, spread, reach. So you can do it right now. You can literally just lift up all your toes, spread them out as wide as you can, keep them as wide as you can keep them, and then lower them back down to the ground and kind of hold that press into the ground for a second or two, and then do that 20 times. So that's a really great way to spread the toes, to activate the four layers of muscles underneath the foot. Pair that with some calf raises, and then you got yourself a nice little plan there. But we even have part of that little goodie bag that you were talking about. We actually came out with a patented design for toe strengtheners so you can add resistance to that lift spread reach. Because what we found was people need to add load. That's how we build strength. And there wasn't really anything out there that targeted it. So that's why we decided to make one.
I think that's awesome. So everyone watching baseball playoffs, football this fall, you have stuff to do, right? Like you can just you don't have to be on your phone. You can do some toe
Yeah.
exercises,
And this
and
stuff isn't just for people who are working on fall risk, right? We
yeah,
actually
these
have done,
everyone.
yeah,
Yeah.
and we've done in-services for some of those NFL teams and for some of those pro athlete teams. And so there's benefits from pain to longevity to athletic performance to just overall health and wellness so that you can take that trip to Europe without having to worry about the foot pain stopping you, you know? So it's it's really something that impacts lives, which is why I care so much about it.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love everything that you shared. Thank you for coming on the show and just communicating your wisdom. I love the energy of what both of you are doing and your whole staff. So I hope this has educated people around what they can do about their feet. And I would also recommend please wash them. Like washing the
Yeah.
feet is a good thing, especially if you're walking barefoot.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. I love talking about this stuff, so I appreciate you helping me get the word out.
Awesome, Jen. Thank you. My hope is that you'll never look at your feet the same way ever again after Jen's wisdom. So much goodness, so many different ways our feet impact our overall health, as she shared. She talked about how it impacts our mental well being, also different ways to really practice better foot health. We even learned a bit more about footwear, and I'll put links to the shoes I now wear. And I will say, they're pretty cool. I mentioned up front that all I cared about before all of this was how cool the shoes looked. Well, I will say, the shoes I wear now, so many people ask me about them. And they're like, where can I get them? And if you have that question too, I'll put the links in the show notes. So there you have it. So many different ways our feet make an impact on our overall health and help us feel whole again. Also in the show notes, I will put ways that you can get in contact with Dr. Perez and learn more about her approach and the rest of the team at Gait Happens. So you can take steps to improve your foot health so you can feel whole again, which is the mission here on this podcast. As always, thank you for being here and thank you for being a member of our community. If you haven't yet signed up for our amazing text messages that offer you free support throughout the week, simply text whole again to 866-612-4604 and I'll set you up. And until our next episode, treat your feet right. Make them happy. It'll help you put a beautiful ripple into the world. And if you wish to learn more about creating beautiful ripples and how to prevent a bad moment from turning into a bad day, please visit my website, michaelobrienshift.com, and sign up for my newsletter called The Ripple Effect. And join us each Monday, Wednesday, and Friday here at Whole Again and discover how you can heal, grow, and become more resilient. And celebrate our scars as golden symbols of strength and resilience. Until then, remember, you can always come back to your breath. You've got this, and we've got you.